Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle, and today we're privileged to have with us Jonathan Farrington, who is the CEO of Top Sales World and the executive editor of Top Sales Magazine. Welcome to the program, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
So, I think when we hear the word sales and we hear the word entrepreneur, we think, is that the same? But I would submit to you, and I know you agree with this, that everyone has the brand of you. You need to be branded as, this person who is an expert in this industry, and we're solving problems for our target audience. It doesn't matter if you're a salesperson for a corporate world industry concern or an entrepreneur owning your own business. And I feel that intrapreneurship, which is, being entrepreneurial under the umbrella of a company, really opens up huge possibilities. So let's give us a little bit of background on yourself and Top Sales World podcast and website and show, and kind of get us started in the world of sales and how you keep your finger to the pulse of sales.
Of course, yes, very happy to do that, Mike. I think just before I launch into that, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, your recent or your last comments really hit the nail on the head, and I think that every salesperson on the planet should accept that they are managing directors or CEOs of their own universe. And I think it's very, very important. The most successful salespeople, we typically talk about the top 7% now. It was top 5, but it's now top 7%. Readily accept that mantle, and they know that their success depends on their own entrepreneurial skills and their ability to build relationships as obviously as well as hit their targets. And I think it's one of the characteristics that really does make them stand out. It's that entrepreneurial spirit. So yeah, absolutely spot on.
Good. Thank you.
Thinking about Top Sales World, thank you for allowing me just really to discuss Top Sales World and the history of Top Sales World. It really started more than 10 years ago when I sold my consultancy, and I wanted to see what we could achieve online. So I reached out to 10 people whose work I admired, and I felt considerable synergy with what they were doing. People like Jill Conrath, Joanne Black, Linda Richardson, Keith Rosen. Interestingly, all 10 are still with the project today. We didn't really know. We did agree that we all wanted to collaborate together, and we had this mutual respect and admiration, but we didn't really know how we were going to do it. So we launched our first site, which was Top Sales Experts. And then within a very short space of time, we had about 90 people that had either phoned in or written in or emailed in and said, can we be involved with this project? So it grew very, very quickly. And then we decided to launch some other sites. So we launched Top Sales World, Top Sales Articles, Top Sales Management. And then one bright sunny morning at around about, I think, 2009, I said, look, I think we're diluting our total effort here. Why don't we bring all of this together under one roof and create a giant hypermarket for sales and marketing professionals globally? And we'll call it Top Sales World. And that's precisely what we did. And from there, we, of course, launched the Top Sales Magazine, which now has a circulation of close to 350,000. I think it's the most popular online magazine within the sales and marketing space. We work with around about 60 contributors every year. We work with 20 partners. We don't call them sponsors simply because, A, I've got a jaundiced view of sponsorship, and B, we work much more closely with them than we would, or you could imagine one would work with a sponsor. And we're constantly waking up every morning and thinking, how can we do this better? Which is why we're always launching new initiatives. I'm pleased to say using Pareto's principle, 80% of them seem to work and stick. 20% of them sometimes aren't as successful as we'd hoped, but that's absolutely fine. We learn enormous lessons from that, and it still has considerable value in learning what doesn't work. And at the end of the day, Top Sales World isn't a business. I think some people go online and they see this website and they see the magazine and they see Academy and they see everything else we're doing, and they must think we're some sort of enterprise organization, which of course we're not. We're a small team who are dedicated to the profession of sales and marketing, and we are simply a website, and we've never made a profit, and I think it's unlikely that we will. We simply plow back in the funding that we get from our very generous and forward-thinking sponsors in order to further improve what we're doing, because the primary objective from day one was to push back the parameters that confine sales and marketing and provide a location for every salesperson and their bosses bosses globally, where they can come and enjoy those free resources every single day, because we add something fresh every single day of the week. So that, it's very difficult for me to be more succinct than that, Mike, because
that's
as you've gathered,
I feel your passion as well, and I love when you can see that. It sounds so cliche to make a comment like, well, we are here to serve and provide value, but yet you can just hear that through your opening there. You are giving and serving and providing value, and when there is not a monetization strategy hitting you between the eyes every 2 seconds and pop-ups and buy now, I think it feels like a very warm and inviting place then for people to come and learn, and collaborate.
I think that's absolutely right, Mike, and there's two other things I would add to that. Yes, of course, you will have noticed my passion and my excitement and my enthusiasm. We call Top Sales World a project. It's not a company, it's a project. And of course I think it's beautiful. It's my baby. I mean, when did you last hear someone say, my baby's ugly? It just doesn't happen. And that's the important thing. And I think the other point that you picked up on is that over at Top Sales World, we don't sell anything. There is nothing for sale. Everything is free. And I think, that was the whole point when we launched from day one, which for me is significant.
Yeah, so let's talk about the future of sales, because I think that when we look in the rearview mirror and see, here's what worked, the last quarter, that could be decades ago in how fast things move. So what are you seeing as the future of sales? I know artificial intelligence is very hot today. Is that going to, so number one, is that viable now, or is that just on the cusp of coming of age? And number two, I would feel that it has wonderful potential, but it has wonderful potential for salespeople to get super lazy and not do their real job and just rely on AI. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, yes. I mean, some salespeople may well become lazy. Others won't be around to become lazy because they'll be replaced by AI, possibly, eventually. But, I mean, when we talk about AI, I think we also have to talk about commoditization. And I think we all of us should recognize the onward and relentless march of what we call commoditization. And it's accelerating. It isn't something that we're now looking forward to. It's here. It's amongst us. And I can identify a huge post-commoditization graveyard somewhere that's full of these people that used to fill our tanks up with gas, that used to sell us insurance, that used to greet us when we walked through the door of the bank, when we wanted to borrow money. None of that happens anymore. And it really is pointless describing that as a B2C phenomenon. It just isn't. I'm a business, and if I want to borrow money, I no longer go and greet my bank manager, or hope rather that he greets me and decides to lend me money based on the cut of my trousers and how shiny my shoes are, or whether he used to play golf with my father. I'm just a credit score now. It really, personalization has been taken away from it. And that is AI. I mean, change is inevitable. I mean, it's one of the constants that we can rely on. And I think it's so important that we mustn't resist it. And certainly AI is right at the front of my thinking and has been now for at least probably 7 or 8 years. I write about it, I think about it, I speak about it. But I think, I would make this point very strongly, Mike. I do not, unlike some other commentators who I think maybe are just going for sensational headlines, I really cannot ever see the death of professional selling. Yes, there's going to be a lot of changes, of course, but providing that we adapt and we adopt and we embrace and we use the power of AI, then I think it can only make us all much, much better.
Yeah, and I think if we can take the approach that AI can give us as salespeople tremendous resources and research so that we can then do our sales job better, not to replace our sales job, because there is never anything, and I know there's exceptions to every rule, but in sales, you're never going to have a push-button solution. Put this ad out there and output will be this sale without you speaking to, communicating with, and people are just throwing their credit card at this sales machine. But AI can help us do what used to be in the old days. You would sit in the prospect's office while you wait for them to see you, and you would notice that they have trophies here and pictures there, and they like sailing, they like golf, and that gives you some ideas about what to talk to about in your conversation to break the ice. And now we have, maybe it's not necessarily artificial intelligence, but it's the internet that we can quickly find some interests and recent blog posts or tweets and bring to the conversation that it just never, ever replaces what we need to do personally. And I think that what you said earlier about, the bank manager not greeting you or we are just a number, if we as salespeople realize that so many other salespeople are not doing that and relying on technology, when we do it, we stand out. Kind of like if you actually return a phone call, the next day within 24 hours to someone, that almost is surprising because so many of our competitors take 2, 3, 4 days or not at all. So I think when that personal touch builds into that personal relationship, and then you use that technology to kind of know where to kind of focus that's where that relationship can go to the next level, because maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, so many salespeople are relying on technology so much that they're hiding behind the computer screen and not even reaching out with a phone call, but then that can be a competitive advantage of yours.
Well, yes, that is true. And I think we have to admit that technology is beginning to replace some sales jobs, but it's replacing order taking. It's as simple as that. Now, 12 years ago, I said, I can see a time in the very near future when smart business owners are going to be bringing their sales teams inside. So many of them are so many external salespeople will be replaced by internal salespeople, inside sales reps, simply because the technology will arrive to allow us to do that. But most important of all, it will make economic sense, because it can cost twice as much to have an external salesperson on the road as it can an internal one. That's not to suggest in any way that an internal or inside salesperson is any less valuable. Of course they are. They've taken on far more skills these days. But, so I said that, again, 10, 12 years ago. And then I started thinking about this maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and I thought to myself, well, I wonder if those same smart business owners that brought their sales teams inside will wake up one morning and go, well, hey, look, my product is becoming more commoditized. Maybe I don't need expensive inside salespeople. Maybe I can get away with order takers. And maybe that's what many companies are now doing. And you know something? You look a few years on from that, will those same smart business owners wake up and go, hey, look, do I need order takers? I've got AI now. I don't need, there is no human interaction with my product. It's not needed. So that's the way I want to go. Now, I did write an article about this that was published on LinkedIn quite a while ago, and somebody came back to me and said, well, this isn't going to happen. It just isn't going to happen. So I said, well, look, Fred, it is happening. And I can quote you 2 examples that I know about in the last 24 months. I have a friend who has a very, very successful company, and he supplies hydraulic components. And 4 years ago, he had an inside sales team of 24. He had 6 external salespeople, and he had 2 major account salespeople. Today, he has no salespeople whatsoever. The people that want to buy hydraulic component parts go online. His profits have soared. His costs, obviously, have reduced considerably, and his company is even more successful. And if I may quickly give you a real example, I have a very good friend who is in agricultural insurance. So his job was to go from farm to farm, and he'd been doing this for virtually, I think, 20 years. And farms these days aren't just small holdings, as you know, Mike, and I'm sure the listeners realize. I mean, they're organizations, they're big business. They have agricultural equipment worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds that needs insuring. They have outbuildings. So he would do this. He would go, have a cup of tea, walk around the farm, and take care of all the insurance. His insurance company, 18 months ago, decided that they were going to get rid of, they made redundant the entire sales force of 62, I think it was, people like John. And all the farmers now are quite happy. They go online and organize their insurance annually. So it is happening. It's real. And we can't be ostrich-like and put our heads in the sand and just say, oh, well, it's never going to happen. It is happening.
You know, it's really interesting that I would think that sometimes people hear about technology and moving sales inside, and I think that a lot of people feel like, well, you know, our low-value, low-profit margin product or service, we can do that, but we still need that relationship with the sales team to go out there for the larger, you know, moving people up the value chain, the value ladder. And that's going to happen. But then when you mentioned the hydraulics example, that certainly feels like or sounds like it would be kind of an educational process and a longer sales cycle, and yet there's some technology that would help in that area as well. So we cannot count out always you must do this or this will never work that way. So I think that technology is giving us just vast and unbelievable resources. You know, we don't even want to get into, you know, virtual reality, you know, where that is going, because that's the next hot thing in even sales. I mean, you could have a virtual reality Second Life kind of setup where people are literally walking through maybe even a trade show and hearing about a product or service, and then now all of a sudden, boy, that's like a website come to life. So, I mean, there's huge potential with that. What do you feel that salespeople are doing now, making mistakes, chasing new business, but yet they're missing out on opportunities where they closed on a deal last week, last month, last quarter, and they're not nurturing that. They're not taking it deeper. They're not adding on, cross-selling, upselling, and I think it's very 25 or 30 years old of this statistic. But you recognize it, I know. It takes 5 to 7 times more money to get a new customer than to keep an old one. Well, whatever the numbers are these days, it really is the case that you need to prospect for new business, but please don't neglect your current clients, because they can be referrals to a new customer, they can be repeat business, they can be upsell, cross-sell, and just staying in touch with them is many times an untapped opportunity.
Well, yes. I think the first thing to say, Mike, is that the cost of selling to a new customer, as opposed to first locating, then qualifying and selling to a new customer, isn't actually 5 to 7 times. It's now 15 to 16 times more expensive.
I bet.
I think that's the first point. The second point is this. Anywhere you go on the internet, into any sales-related location, you will discover, and I always revert back to Pareto's principle, you'll find that 80% of what you find that's written, spoken, recorded, suggested, is all about prospecting and winning new business. Less than 20%, so I'm being generous, less than 20% is devoted to discussion, to dialogue, to advice, to consultancy about the customer experience, about retaining existing clients, about building relationships, about developing those accounts. And yet, this is most surprising. If you take a typical commercial organization anywhere in this world, 80% of its business on an annual basis will come from existing clients, and yet only 20% of that company's time is spent in nurturing, developing, and building those relationships, which I find quite extraordinary. It is suicidal. And looking across, I looked at a survey by the Institute of Sales and Marketing Management that was conducted here in the UK and Europe in 2016. And they're suggesting that the average company loses between 16 and 38% of their existing clients annually. They're just dripping out of the back. And you think the most common reason given was that they were offered a better shiny deal, more discount, something more exciting, a more up-to-date product. It wasn't true at all. And funnily enough, I would suggest that the sales directors and the VP sales and even the salespeople themselves would have provided that excuse. Oh, well, they must have been offered a better deal. It wasn't true at all. The most common reason given by more than 60% of respondents to this huge survey was that they felt neglected. Once the original foreplay had concluded and the sales had been made and they placed their first order, they felt that complacency had settled into the relationship and they just felt that they had no value anymore. So when somebody came along, a competitor, who genuinely demonstrated that they wanted the business, although, again, they could have gone through another cycle. But suddenly they felt wanted again. They felt attractive. They felt desired again. And so, of course, they left the incumbent supplier. And these are today's realities.
I agree. I've heard it said that you lose 10% of your influence with your customers and clients every month that you don't stay in touch. And and that could probably compound. I mean, 6 months from now, if that's 60%, any of your competitors that come along now all of a sudden sound wonderful, and even if they drop the ball in 6 or 7 months, that customer just feels like one of these times I'm going to, find a relationship that is long-term. I think that is so massive. And I recently interviewed someone that talks about referral relationships, and they recommend, focusing, taking your clients, and not every client is a A++ or gold or whatever you want to think of them, but, even segmenting them into ABC, and the A's look like this and the B's look like that. But the A's would get some type of higher attention than the C's. And that attention could be even just a phone call, or what if it's a customized gift every quarter with their logo on it, or just whatever all of those things could be. But the point is, to your point, attention. And if you can take your top clients and your B clients and really focus that attention on them, then it gets back to that Pareto's principle of 80-20. Now you're focusing your attention on your 20% that really does bring you 80% of your income or revenues, and you can get as close as possible to cloning that 20%, because you might not need to double your sales. You might just need to clone your 20%, and now all of a sudden it gives you, as close to possible as massive returns. And I think that's a nugget that salespeople or business people don't take into consideration.
Well, yes, of course. Of course I agree with you. But there are two positions beyond Evangelist. There are two positions beyond referrals. First, after people are prepared to give us referrals, which is always wonderful, but we have to go and ask for them, of course. But I love it when they become advocates. When my clients, when our top sales world partners become advocates, and I love it even more when they become evangelists. And that's really what we should be aiming for.
Yes, it's like the old saying, you don't want happy customers because they're complacent. They're just, mediocre at best. You want raving fans, or you want advocates, and whatever your value chain is, you want them to be pleased with you first, of course, but then you want them to just take it up to the next level where they become almost, like you said, evangelists, where, they can't help themselves. They're out there with your product or service on the tip of their tongue every interaction or social media interaction they see opportunities, and they're plugging you just because they feel compelled to. Why? Because all of these factors, convoluted into one positive relationship. You're staying in touch. You're giving value. You're giving attention. And, your product or service was very good because you could do all of these things, and your product or service is lacking, and now it has a big hole in that bucket. So that's a very huge takeaway. Hey, so let's wrap up with what's the best way that people can learn more about Top Sales World and your magazine?
Well, very simply, to go across. We're open for business 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. www.topsalesworld.com. When you get over there, you'll discover all of the resources that are available, not just the magazine. The 2017 Top Sales Academy, which is free to attend, launches on April the 10th. In fact, Top Sales World launches a brand new website on April the 4th. And we have so many new and exciting resources that we're bringing to the table. For example, there'll be a daily audio tip. So all of our contributors and partners are wading in and providing short, sharp, snappy, and relevant, and dare I say significant, 3 to 5 minute sales tips. And that's just one example. And when anyone goes across the Top Sales World, they'll be able to download the Top Sales magazine, subscribe for free, never miss a copy. It comes out every month, and it's packed with superb articles and news and gossip.
Excellent. Well, Jonathan, it's been a very huge pleasure to talk with you and learn from your perspectives and your finger to the pulse of the sales industry. So thank you for all you do, and thank you for being on the show today.
Well, look, thank you. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to further publicize what all of our objectives for Top Sales World and what we're trying to achieve. This interview really isn't about me. It's about, I think it's my thoughts, yes, but really it's an opportunity to tell even more people about the amazing things that we're working on over at Top Sales World. So really, genuinely, thank you.
You're welcome, and I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Jonathan.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.